All right, welcome, Eric, to our show. So good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I will say, the doctor's in the house. We got the doctor in the house. So we're going to get into a lot of cool stuff. But I want to start with this concept of the three-legged stool, which advisors have known about forever. But maybe some individuals, pre-retirees, retirees, they don't really know what we mean by the three-legged stool. So can you go through that?
Sure. Yeah, there's probably different three-legged stools.
Yeah, right.
The one that we're kind of thinking about is from a retirement income perspective. We're trying to think about the three sort of main sources that an individual might have in retirement. And so the three that we're thinking of, the first one would be DB plans, or defined benefit plans, or
Sure.
what we would think of as a pension plan. The second would be DC plans, which would be sort of your normal retirement savings plan that you would have through work, let's say. And then the third would be Social Security.
Right. And so when we think about that, I mean, let's start with Social Security. I mean, we all know that the funds are maybe running out in the 2030s at some point. How should people be planning or thinking about Social Security these days?
Yeah, it's obviously been in the news a lot lately, right? And we have the Doge in there cutting jobs
Sure.
and things like that. But I think from the things that aren't changing are that when you think about the percentage of retirement income that comes from Social Security, that's relatively stable, right? So we know that your more affluent client, Social Security is going to be a smaller percentage. Whereas if you're sort of lower on the wealth scale, kind of that mass market, if you will, Social Security can be up to 40% of your total retirement income. So I think that's where some of these concerns come in, right? Is if there's going to be changes to the funding status of Social Security, how is that going to change the planning conversations around that, right? Like if they start to extend the age that's sort of the normal retirement age, if people want to still take it at 62, is that going to now represent an even smaller portion of their retirement income when normally it was a larger portion? So I think that's where some of the concerns are around that.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of Social Security, obviously it's had issues before, and there's been fixes. I mean, you increase the retirement age, or you increase the percentage withheld, or you increase the cap. Do you see these things happening again in the future to keep it a little bit more solvent, or should we really be worried that the trust fund's going to run out and we're just only going to have maybe 70-75% of the promised benefits?
Yeah, man, that's the trillion-dollar question.
I know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a variety of solutions on the table. What will actually take place, we won't know, right? And I think the thing that kind of worries me a little bit is that those in office may not even know. And so then it makes it more challenging for us as advisors when we're working with clients to how do we then advise that. What I would say is, because when we think about the three-legged stool, knowing that that is a potential weak part of the stool, so to speak, is then thinking about how do we manage these other two sources of income that we do have control over. And I think that's where some of the planning opportunities lie.
Yeah, and particularly defined contribution plans, 401ks, 403bs, and the like. So, that seems pretty straightforward. Max it out. Get as much in there as you can. Get the match. Have it compound and that sort of thing. But what about the other leg, defined benefit plans? There are less and less of those around. So it makes our own saving even that much more important.
I agree. Yeah, and to your point, I think the stats that I'm aware of are on that DB stool, that pension leg, so to speak, is something like only 11% of employees now have that as a source of income. So again, you think about the three legs. We have the Social Security leg. Maybe that's a wobbly leg, right? The DB one is now a shorter or smaller leg. And then we have this kind of third oversized portion, which is that sort of normal source of retirement income. I think what's interesting about that is how some of the retirement income types of solutions that we've seen that you would think of as a DB, a pension type of plan, are starting to now find their way into these normal retirement plans. And I think that's, when I think about it from both an employer's perspective and a financial advisor's perspective, is how do we help clients make the optimal solutions around these kind of newer products that we're not used to making decisions about.
Yeah, and it seems like there's new products daily almost.
Absolutely.
Let me change gears a little bit because AI, artificial intelligence, is prevalent, growing, changing everything, including the financial services industry. How do you see that rolling out? What's happening right now? How should we be thinking about that?
Well, I would say this: if you're gonna use AI, make sure you're like really nice to it when you're talking to it, just in case it takes over. It'll remember that you were polite. So all joking aside, I mean, I think some of it reminds me of the robo-advisor conversations that we had 10, 15 years ago,
sure.
right?
They were going to take over the advising world. I remember
exactly,
that.
Exactly, right. And I think when some of these tools came out a couple years ago or coming out, there were similar conversations, right? Like, oh, it's going to take over. And really what we're finding is just like with the robo-advisor space, it ended up being a tool that advisors were using to be more efficient, to be more productive, and get some of their time back, right? And I think that's what we're starting to see. There's a variety of tools that are out there. One of the ones that I have found most interesting are some of these tools that actually just record your conversation as you're having them. And the feedback that we're getting is that as advisors are using that with their clients, it's actually helping the advisor focus more just on that meeting itself instead of having to like write copious notes of what they talked about, right? And they know that there's actually a solution that's doing that for them, so they can actually be more engaged with the client when they're having those conversations.
So in that example, that's an advantage for advisors and the clients too, because they'll probably get better notes, better summary of what they talked about. But what are some of the concerns? What are some of the potential downsides that you see?
Well, okay, so if there's a downside, I think there's a data privacy concern, right? When we did a presentation on Kitsis a year ago, that was like the number one question. It came in a different, variety of different forms, but it's like, what happens to the data? Like, what happens when I share this information? I think advisors need to be really cautious about that part, right? So if they're trying to think about what they're putting into these systems, does that information now become part of the public domain? Or like T said, if they're recording these conversations, what are the safety concerns around that? And I think there's ways to protect the information, but I think whether you're an advisor or a client, you better do your homework and make sure that you know what those security protocols are.
Got it. So let's focus on the client experience, the investor, the retiree. Is AI? Do you see AI sort of improving their experience? Is it something that they can use too, or is this more the way you see it? More advisors will use it to be more efficient.
Yeah, the way that I think about it is when AI is really good, you don't actually know that it's there, right? Like I don't want to say this because maybe it's going to set off somebody's phone at home, but like if you say, "Hey Google," "Hey Siri,"
yes.
Right? Like you don't even really think that you're even talking to an AI. And I think a lot of these tools, when it's good AI, it's just embedded in whatever that normal workflow is that you have. So if you're an advisor, you may not realize that it's even part of like your planning software. From the client's perspective, I think some of the cool things that we'll see is maybe Alan is busy, right? Maybe Alan is recording a podcast,
right,
and it's hard to reach Alan right now. So some of these other tools, if you could somehow put, say even 50% of Alan's knowledge into a chat feature where a client could then reach out to an AI version of Alan and get some initial responses, maybe you can get some of these service-related items addressed,
right?
That instead of it so it frees up some of your time.
Interesting.
Well.
Yeah. So let me ask you another question on that. ChatGPT. What if a client wants to use them or that as their advisor? What do you think of that?
Well, here's what I'll say. So we actually did a survey recently and asked people how willing they are to get advice from an AI source, and it turns out it's actually 50-50. So there's actually a pretty large percentage of people that are interested in getting this automated advice. And then if you look at the details of that even further, it's actually those types of people that are sort of that underserved clientele, right? So it's maybe they don't meet a wealth threshold to be serviced by an advisor. So it's not sort of like the typical client, if you will, that wants to work with an advisor, that is interested in those tools. It's actually just the opposite. It's a type of person that isn't typically served by an advisor, now there's this sort of other source of information that they have to access. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, right? Because we know that when you use it, there can be errors within the data itself. So I think to me that it makes the value of an advisor that much more, knowing that there's errors in this data sometimes, that to me it makes it that much more important to have an advisor where you can sort of check some of the answers that you're getting from ChatGPT.
So that reminds me of maybe the type of clientele or individual that the robo-advisors were going after. Maybe now it's ChatGPT.
Exactly. Yep. And then instead of being investment management, it's maybe just some bigger planning questions that they have.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. So let's think about maybe fast forward 2 or 3 decades, because people are concerned. What's the future of AI? How do you think about the long term? Should we be concerned? Do we think that we'll have this under control and it'll be helpful? It seems like almost every tool that is introduced, it's used for good and bad. What do you think?
Right. So I like the way that you asked that question, because a lot of people are thinking about AI in terms of a decade from now, 2 decades from now. And if you think about how fast this world has changed, it's like we don't know what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now. And just the way that the human brain works is we're really good at looking back at history and making a dotted line that's sort of straight, but it's not a straight line, right? Like the whole idea of compounding is that it's parabolic. And so we look back and we think that it's going to be a certain way. The truth is, if you were to actually turn around and look at it, the line is hitting you in the face, right? It's a super steep curve. So I don't know. I think if I had to guess, I'd like to think that these companies are altruistic, that there's going to be, that the end benefit really is going to be there, right? Like it's not just going to take over the world. I think, like we saw in the robo advising world, that they really are just tools. The interesting thing that we saw with one of our surveys is that we asked advisors that are using AI what they did with their free time, and we actually saw that the number one answer wasn't that they were just enjoying more free time. It was actually that they were spending that more time with their clients. So it was more service, more value.
Got it.
And that's what I think is encouraging.
Got it. So thinking about it in that way, this really could be a great tool for, not just the financial services industry, but virtually every industry out there, used for good.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to meet you, great to chat with you about topics that a lot of us don't really know a lot about, and you bring some clarity, so thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Al.
Awesome.
It's been fun.
Great.